Have you ever stopped to consider the nature of death, not as something to fear or flee from, but as a part of life's ever-turning wheel? The Buddha once gently reminded us that all conditioned things are impermanent, and yet we live in a world that often recoils at the mention of death. It is feared, ignored, sometimes even denied entirely. Conversations around it are hushed, as though speaking of death might somehow summon it closer. But why is it that we fear death so deeply? Could it be because we see it as a final chapter, a closing door, or an unfathomable unknown? But what if, just what if, death was not the end at all? What if death is not a conclusion, but merely a passage? Just as spring gracefully gives way to summer, and summer yields to fall, death too is a transition, a natural unfolding in the rhythm of the cosmos. Today, let us gently walk into the heart of this subject, guided by the timeless wisdom of the Buddha, and discover why death should not be feared. From the very moment we draw our first breath, we are moving steadily, unavoidably toward our last. This is not a cause for despair. It is simply one of the most basic truths of being alive. Birth and death are intertwined, two sides of the same coin. Yet across the world, especially in many modern societies, death is viewed as a tragedy, something to resist at all costs, an enemy to be defeated. But Buddhism offers a different lens, a lens not clouded by fear, but illuminated by insight. The Buddha taught that nothing in this world is permanent. Just as a river does not stand still, but continues to flow, reshaping itself moment by moment, so too do our lives unfold in an ever-changing stream of experiences. Death, then, is not the full stop at the end of a sentence. It is a comma, a pause, a moment between chapters. It is a continuation, not cessation. When this truth is deeply understood, not just intellectually, but in the quiet core of your being, fear begins to dissolve. Death becomes less of a frightening mystery and more of a natural event in the rhythm of existence. Why do we fear death so intensely? Much of this fear comes from our attachment to identity, to this sense of I, this belief that we are this body, this mind, this name, this personality. But the Buddha taught a radical and liberating truth, anatta, or no self. What we often call the self is not a fixed, unchanging entity. It's a momentary coming together of thoughts, memories, emotions, and bodily sensations. Even our physical form is in a constant state of transformation. The body you inhabit today is not the same one you had 10 years ago. Nearly every cell has been renewed, replaced. So, if there is no unchanging self, no eternal me to cling to, what exactly are we so afraid of losing? When we let go of the illusion of a permanent self, we begin to release the fear of death as well. Because what dies then? A form changes, an experience passes, but the essence of existence flows onward. Everything around us whispers this truth of impermanence. Flowers blossom and then wither. The sky shifts from clear to stormy. Trees lose their leaves only to bud again. Seasons move in an endless cycle. Nothing is fixed. This is anicca, the law of impermanence. And suffering, the Buddha taught, arises not from change itself, but from our resistance to it. We try to cling to youth, to health, to relationships, to things we cannot keep. We hold on tightly, fearing the inevitable loss, but the more we resist, the more pain we feel. When we stop fighting change and begin to accept it, peace begins to take root. We start to realize that everything, even death, is a part of the natural order. There is no need to fear the end because in truth there is no end, only transformation. And in this acceptance we find not despair, but profound freedom. Buddhism teaches us that death is not some arbitrary event. It is woven into the law of karma. Just as a farmer plants seeds and later reaps what was sown, so too do our actions, words, and thoughts plant seeds that shape our future, this life and beyond. Death is like changing clothes. When our physical body becomes worn out, we discard it and our consciousness moves on. shaped by the energy, intentions, and karma we've cultivated. When we live mindfully, with kindness in our hearts, wisdom in our actions, and compassion in our words, we create the conditions for a peaceful transition. There is no need for dread when we've lived a life rooted in goodness. Rather than focusing on death, we are encouraged to focus on living well. When we do, we prepare ourselves for death not with regret, but with grace and serenity. Often, our fear of death is deeply entangled with our attachments to our loved ones, our possessions, our titles and achievements. We fear not just dying, but leaving behind everything we've held dear. But here again, the Buddha reminds us that attachment is the root of suffering. Everything we cherish will change, decay, or eventually disappear. Holding on tightly only intensifies the pain. Instead, we can choose to love without clinging, to appreciate without owning. We can learn to let go, not because we don't care, but because we understand that nothing was ever truly ours to begin with. When death comes, as it will to all, we can greet it not with resistance, but with a quiet acceptance, even a gentle smile. The practice of mindfulness offers us a powerful way to cultivate this wisdom. By training ourselves to be fully present, to observe our thoughts, our fears, and our desires without being swept away by them, we learn to face even death with clarity and calm. Buddhist monks often meditate on death regularly, not out of morbid fascination, but to dissolve fear and deepen awareness. They do not turn away from death. They contemplate it, embrace it, and in doing so, make peace with it. We too can do this. Through daily mindfulness and meditation, we can prepare our minds to meet death not as a stranger, but as a familiar companion on the path. Death then becomes a teacher. Its presence reminds us that life is precious because it is fleeting. It nudges us to love more deeply, to speak more kindly, to forgive more freely. When we live with the awareness that our time is limited, we no longer squander it on trivial arguments, grudges, or endless chasing of hollow goals. We return to what truly matters: compassion, connection, truth, and peace. In this way, death becomes not something to dread, but something that gives shape and urgency to our lives. The Buddha himself approached death with equanimity. His final words were not filled with sorrow or fear, but with insight and calm. He reminded his followers to continue practicing diligently, to seek the truth within, and to understand that all things are subject to change. Enlightened beings do not grieve their end because they realize there is no absolute beginning or final end, only constant unfolding. Throughout history, great Buddhist teachers and masters have passed away peacefully, even joyfully. Their lives were their preparation, their teachings were their legacy, and their deaths became one final lesson in letting go. So remember this: death is not a mistake. It is not a failure or a punishment. It is simply part of the great flowing cycle of life, and when we see it clearly without illusion or fear, we are liberated from suffering. We begin to live not in fear of dying, but in full embrace of each moment we are given. If this message resonated with your heart, we invite you to like this video, share your reflections in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more timeless teachings from the path of the Buddha. Until we meet again, may you walk with mindfulness, live with compassion, and rest in the peace that comes from true understanding.